Hello everyone, this is Skull Crusher MD bringing you a new skull crushing educational video. Today's topic is the biceps labrum complex. Well, it's supposed to be about the entire biceps labral complex, but the video got too long, so I'm going to divide it into two parts. And the first part is about the glenoid labrum. And without further ado, let's get crushed. Alright, so the biceps labrum complex. What is it? Well, it is exactly as it sounds. It is a complex that is composed of the long head of the biceps as well as the glenoid labrum. Let's start with the glenoid labrum. This right here is a bird's eye view of the glenoid cavity, and the glenoid labrum is this triangular structure. It is a fiber cartilage ring that goes all around the glenoid cavity. It is about 4 to 6 millimeters wide and 3 to 4 millimeters thick. It is a passive stabilizer of the shoulder joint and adds depth to the shallow glenoid fossa. As you can see, this glenoid fossa is very shallow and it adds extra depth right here. It provides up to 50% of stability by increasing the contact area on the humeral head, and it acts sort of like a tight suction cup mechanism. It allows negative intra-articular pressure of about 32 millimeters of mercury. So the way I like to think about the biceps labral complex is if you think about it like a lasso. So this is the rope and this is the loop. So you have the humeral head here, and you have the biceps tendon, which is the rope, and the glenoid labrum, that is a lasso, and it's holding on to the humeral head and stabilizing it. It's not letting it go anywhere. So I have previously mentioned that the glenoid labrum provides about 50% of the stability in the shoulder joint. Now you can imagine if there is a lesion or an injury to the labrum, this can decrease the stability of the joint by as much as 20%, and that can screw with the mechanics of the joint. This is actually a fairly common injury. Some famous examples are Drew Brees, Cam Newton, and Andrew Luck. And I have had this injury myself. It can be pretty debilitating and nagging. So here's another view of the glenoid labrum looking into the shoulder joint. This white rim is the glenoid labrum. The glenoid labrum is also important because it is the attachment site of the long head of the biceps, the superior glenohumeral ligament, the middle glenohumeral ligament, and the anterior and posterior bands of the inferior glenohumeral ligament. Now the labrum is most firmly attached posteriorly and inferiorly, where the tissue is the most uniform and inelastic. As you will learn in human anatomy, no two bodies are the same, and likewise, no two labrums are the same. Labrums come in many different shapes and sizes. Of course, the triangular one is the most common, but they can also be rounded, comma-shaped flattened, cleaved, notched, and come in a variety of forms. And in some individuals, the labrum may be absent. Now, the part of the labrum that is most unique is the superior labrum because of its different anatomy and properties. The superior labrum can be likened to the guy that makes your heart flutter because, he's just different, he's unique. The reason I am saying this is because first, the long head of the biceps attaches to the superior labrum. The fibers of the long head of the biceps actually blend in with the glenoid labrum 5 millimeters from the glenoid rim and forms the biceps labrum complex. The superior labrum is more meniscal in appearance, and it has thin, elastic connective tissue with looser attachments. This area is also relatively avascular, making it more vulnerable to injuries and has impaired healing potential when compared to the posterior and inferior labrum, which is why a primary repair of a slap tear has almost a 30% failure or revision rate. Next, we must talk about the normal anatomic variants of the superior labrum. The three variants that are most commonly discussed in the literature are the sublabral foramen, the sublabral recess, and the Buford complex. So let's start with the sublabral recess or sulcus, as it is the most common. It can be present in about 70% of individuals, and its characteristics are that it is less than 3 millimeters in size. It is located around the biceps anchor. It used to be thought that it cannot extend posterior to the biceps anchor, but that has since been debunked. And there is high signal that extends medially and follows the contour of the glenoid cartilage. So in this MRI image, you see this dye that is following the contour of the glenoid cartilage and extends medially. This is in contrast to a slap tear, which is pathologic. I had mentioned this previously earlier in the video, but I didn't explain what it was. It stands for a superior labrum anterior-posterior tear, and I will explain this further in another video. Now, the characteristics of a slap tear are usually that it is larger than 3 millimeters in size. It is also located at the biceps anchor, which is why it can be difficult to differentiate it from a sublabral recess sometimes. It has an irregular margin. It's usually frayed or torn, and it has high signal that extends laterally. This is the main difference. So as you saw in the sublabral recess, the dye went medially. Well, the dye in a labral tear, in a slap tear, goes laterally. Here is another good illustration of the difference. So a sublabral recess or sulcus will extend medially and follow the contour of the cartilage, whereas a slap tear will go laterally. Next is the sublabral foramen, which can be seen in about 11 to 15% of individuals. This is just a focal detachment at around the 1 to 3 o'clock position on the anterior superior labrum. It creates a communication between the glenohumeral joint and the sublabral recess. So on MRI, you can sometimes see dye go through this area, and it is also associated with a cord-like or thickened middle glenohumeral ligament. The main difference between a sublabral foramen and the sublabral recess is that the glenoid labrum is completely detached from the glenoid rim. In the sublabral recess, the glenoid labrum is usually still attached. And you can memorize this because foramen in Latin means an opening. So in a sublabral foramen, there is an opening where dye can go through this hole. Now, despite this giant gaping hole, this is actually considered a normal anatomic variant as long as the edges are not torn or frayed. Last but not least is the Bieford complex, the rarest of them all. This is usually present in about 1.5% of individuals, and it is characterized by an absent anterior superior labrum. There is no labrum here, with a very thick and cord-like middle glenohumeral ligament. Now, you can see that this normal variant can oftentimes be misinterpreted as a labral tear of a displaced long head of the biceps. Here is a good MRI image where you can see the labrum on this side, but on the anterior side there is no labrum here, and you have a thick middle glenohumeral ligament. It is important to mention that even though these variants are considered normal, that with excessive stress and tension and overuse, these normal variants can also in fact become pathologic. And with this information, I think that is a good stopping point. I think this is a good introduction of the glenoid labrum. I was going to make this video about both the glenoid labrum and the biceps tendon, but the video is starting to get a little long, so I think I'm going to separate the topics and make a new video just on the biceps tendon, so you can follow along and watch the next video. Thank you so much for tuning into the video. Like, subscribe, and I will see you next time. Peace out.